Hey everyone, this week I decided to watch Breaking Boundaries, The Science of Our Planet. So this is a documentary that was produced on Netflix, and I think it's 2 or 3 years old at this point. But it features David Attenborough. He does a lot of the narrations, and then like the primary scientist who's featured is Johan Rockström, and he has been on a number of like TED Talks and has written like books and papers and done lifelong research about the climate and about the global biodiversity crisis. So the big focus of this documentary is examining the factors that are contributing to the biodiversity crisis and what we can do to address them. And so Dr. Rockström's research has defined 9 boundaries, i.e. like these are kind of thresholds that within which the planet can be stable and function as we've known it in human time. But if we go beyond those boundaries, if it exceeds certain thresholds, then the biosphere can become destabilized. We can end up with like positive feedback loops where, we're destroying forests and interrupting carbon sequestration, and then there's less carbon capture, so greenhouse gases and warming effects just further intensify. So it's like, these reinforcing processes that can, once we're destabilized, the Earth is going to actually kind of self-reinforce and get worse. So they define these 9 boundaries, and the colors here on the screen are just, where we currently stand on these things. So ozone layer, by addressing like CFCs and aerosols, we've actually, kind of reversed the negative trend on this. So we're okay with ozone layer. Ocean acidification, we're not in the danger zone with that yet. Same with freshwater systems. In terms of air pollution and then novel pollutants, that would be things like plastics and synthetic things that humans make. We're not sure how close we are to the threshold on those. And then for climate, forest loss, nutrients, biodiversity, we've already exceeded some of the thresholds where we would ideally want to limit those kinds of impacts to those things. So then the documentary talks about what can we do to address some of these thresholds we've already stepped over, and some of the big kind of action items that they hit in the documentary are restoring forests so that we're improving natural carbon sequestration and the stabilizing role with the hydrologic systems, etc., that forests have. Then rethinking human food systems. They recommend people switching to more plant-based diets, eating less meat, and also trying to rework how we're producing food so that we're reducing the negative environmental footprint of our foodways. Finally, they recommend that we reduce waste, particularly with commodities and how commodified our economy and just human civilization is. If we can design these products and all the everyday things we use with materials that are inherently recyclable, and if we have recovery streams in place so that we're not throwing things into landfills, but every bit of waste can go back into use, back into being reshaped, reformed, made into another usable product. We're closing the production loops on these materials to products and back around again. So to kind of sum up the messaging in the documentary surrounding the biodiversity crisis, I think the documentary did a good job of defining the boundaries, defining these drivers of what makes the planet and the biosphere work, and how destabilizing in these things is contributing to the biodiversity crisis. They make it really clear that anthropogenic impacts on the planet are the major driver here of the planet's problems, as so many of us know. The scale of the documentary is global, so in examining each of the boundaries, they're giving examples from professionals and people living all over the world. So a lot of different human experiences and human perspectives are included. In terms of the emotional appeal and what values the documentary is drawing upon, it definitely does kind of call upon human ingenuity and resilience in our ability to not only have we caused this problem, but that means we can also work to solve the problem. Humans can do it. We're not so far down this path that we can't reverse some of these negative trends. It does have a lot of emotional messages from people who are impacted by these problems, and still most of the people featured in the films are like scientists and researchers. It's not so much showing everyday humans who are impacted by like water crises, for example. However, there's, I think, a lot of emotion conveyed in these people who have dedicated their lives to studying the planet, to studying the climate, and who are, working to try to figure out what we can do. In terms of the intended audience of this, whoever can afford a Netflix subscription can watch this, but I do not think that this documentary would appeal to people who don't already acknowledge that climate change is happening, that humans are the cause of so many of the environmental problems that we're living with and experiencing already in our daily lives. So I don't think that this documentary is so good for trying to persuade someone or convert them to thinking a certain way about the planet, but for people who are already somewhat knowledgeable and receptive, I do think the documentary has a good amount of science and can convey concrete ideas to people who are receptive. So overall, per my review of the documentary, I would give it a 7 out of 10 rating. I think it included a good amount of science, but in a digestible way, so that you can understand each of the nine boundaries it focuses on, and what is driving this crisis. Cons, some of the visuals were a bit cheesy and repetitive. So, all of the real world footage of people out on site talking about their work, they had beautiful footage of, elephants and the wilderness. All of that was lovely, and David Attenborough's voice and narration was on point as always. But then they did have these CG graphics trying to represent conceptually, humans are stepping over these thresholds and we're already in the danger zone for some of these. Each of those was shown 10 times during the documentary, and that was tiresome. Kind of a minor criticism, but more importantly, I feel like one con of the documentary, something that could have been improved, was having more discussion around the actionable solutions. So, they did give concrete examples of what can we do about this crisis, and we're just people, individuals, what are we supposed to do about this? I feel like they could have had maybe a bit more oomph behind that. It's really hard for a documentary to hit the right tone and not cross over the line between things are really messed up, but we can have this optimistic outlook about it for X, Y, and Z reasons. Not many documentaries, at least for me, really hit that message in the right spot. And that's the big challenge I think a lot of us are facing right now in our science communication is, how do we avoid defeatism? How can we have, when we're communicating to the general public or to other scientists, how can we have the right tone, say, yeah, things are messed up, but we've dedicated our lives to working on these kinds of problems, and we're just individual peoples, but collectively, how do we pull this off? How can we do better? That's just a tough thing to get right. And I'm sure that's kind of the point of this assignment as well, is how do we tailor our science communication to have the right kind of impact for the right audience? And ultimately, how does communication help us to actually drive change and actually do some of these things that we have to?